Hello.
I thought I was just dropping something off. It was almost 9, the hour when shop windows dim and the sidewalks grow reflective with leftover heat. Her glass container, the one that smuggled lasagna to my apartment last weekend, sat wrapped in a dish towel inside my backpack. No text, no call. Knock, return, leave. That was the script, and I liked how short it was. Her street knew me in the way old streets know everyone. The sprinkler hiss, the porch light flicker, the moths persistent as small ideas. A narrow band of warm light cut across her steps. It implied nothing and suggested everything. I counted 5 boards to the door, then knocked, 2 light, 1 certain. The lock turned. She opened wearing a robe. Not theatrical, soft cotton, belt tied, sleeves pushed to her forearms as if she just washed her hands. Her hair looked damp at the ends. A curl rested against her collarbone. I forgot the line I'd rehearsed. "Hey," she said, easy as noon. "You found me between laundry and giving up on emails." I lifted the bag. Returning stolen property. Her smile shifted. A public service. "Come in for a second." I stepped inside because seconds are hard to refuse. I reminded myself I am 22, not a kid sneaking into a memory. But nerves don't study calendars. They arrive with old habits, the careful voice, the posture of being on best behavior. She had been the person who asked if we wanted more grilled cheese, the steady laugh from the kitchen. Time had changed the angles, not the facts, and yet the facts felt newly complicated standing this close to them. The house smelled faintly of lemon and something herbal. A piano murmured from the living room. A record, by the gentle hiss between notes. She closed the door with a soft click that landed louder than it should have. "Counter's fine," she said. I set the container down and unzipped the towel like I was presenting evidence. "Not a scratch," I added, and felt ridiculous for caring about proof. She leaned her hip to the counter. "These always multiply. 1 returns, 2 appear. They travel in packs," I said. She laughed. Small, effortless, and something unsteady inside me leveled a little. "Water? Tea?" she asked. "I've declared a truce with caffeine after 6. Enforcement is ongoing. Water's perfect." Our fingers didn't touch when she handed me the glass, but the gap felt noticed by both of us. I looked at the record player to give my eyes a job. "Bill Evans," I said. She tilted her head, pleased. "It is. Sunday at the Vanguard. That earns you a kitchen pass. I'll print a badge." Silence arrived, not awkward, just present. It pooled in the tiles like a puddle we both stepped around. I took a sip and remembered the script. Knock, return, leave. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said, softer. "I was nearby. I lied or wished true." Her gaze slid toward the window where the porch light haloed the glass. "Good timing anyway. The house argues with quiet when it's only me." I nodded with more understanding than I actually owned. The robe's belt lay in a neat knot. She smoothed it without seeming to notice. Ordinary gesture. "Not ordinary. I can get out of your way," I offered. "You're not in it," she said, then paused like she'd arrived at a door in her own sentence. "Unless you want to be." An opening thin as a breath. Not a dare. An allowance. I stayed. She pulled a small basket onto the table. "Fold with me and I'll pretend I'm not procrastinating." We worked in a rhythm that didn't need instruction. I misfolded 2 towels. She rescued them with a smile that didn't accuse. "Thanks again for the boxes last weekend," she said. "The stairs and I are on unfriendly terms." They bark, I said. No bite. You always were good at making hard things sound manageable. You make it sound like we have history. We do a little, she said, glancing up. Grilled cheese. After-school cartoons. You were shorter and louder. I've kept one of those, I said. I'll let you guess which. Her eyes held mine half a second too long. The record clicked through a quiet scratch. I counted without choosing to. When the basket was empty, she looked around like she'd misplaced a plan and remembered it. I was going to make chamomile. You should, I said, making no move to leave. She regarded the kettle, then shook her head. Maybe the plan is 5 minutes of conversation instead. 5. I agreed, trusting numbers as if they were guardrails. We traded small stories. The neighbor who waters plastic plants at midnight. The client who names spreadsheets like pets. Outside, a breeze nudged the porch chimes and the sound threaded the kitchen. Her phone buzzed once on the counter and went quiet. She didn't look. Eventually she checked the wall clock for real. I'm making you late. Maybe my night was this, I said, and it arrived before I could edit it. Caution flickered through her expression, then settled into something warmer. She nodded like a judge granting a lenient sentence. I picked up my backpack. The weight returned, but whatever had buoyed us didn't vanish. We walked to the door together. The hallway beyond held its own hush, cool and uncurious. Thank you, she said at the threshold. The thank you carried other words inside it. For coming without asking, for staying without pushing, for not rushing. Returning contraband is serious business, I said, and drew out one more laugh. She opened the door. The porch light made a soft circle on the steps, and for a beat we both stood in it. Two people pretending this was still a simple errand. Her shoulder rested against the frame, a small anchor. Good night, she said. Good night. I stepped down into the mild dark, the piano line still tracing the inside of my head. The street stretched away, slow and manageable. Behind me, the door closed like a breath being held, and the world resumed at a slightly different angle. I walked, counting without meaning to, already inventing an excuse to pass this block again. The excuse came faster than I thought it would. 2 days later, I told myself I was in the neighborhood, though my own street was 3 blocks in the opposite direction. I carried no container this time, no justification that could be photographed and filed. Just me and a vague need that felt like hunger with no kitchen to fix it. Her porch light was on. That alone felt like permission. I hesitated only long enough to notice the moths doing their endless circuits. Then I knocked. The door opened halfway, as if she'd been waiting nearby. The robe was gone. Today it was jeans and a linen shirt, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with a clip. Casual, but still enough to stall my words. Hey, she said, surprise and warmth braided together. Twice in 1 week? I lifted my empty hands, mock surrender. No evidence this time, just checking in. Her smile tilted. Come in, then. The kettle owes me a reason to use it. The record player wasn't on tonight. Instead, the faint hum of the fridge filled the pauses. She set mugs on the counter, measuring tea leaves like she was measuring trust. I watched the steam rise and felt ridiculous for memorizing something so ordinary. You're quieter than I remember, she said, sliding my mug across. Less restless. College cures that, I said. Or maybe it hides it. She stirred her own tea without looking up. You don't have to hide it here. We sat at the kitchen table, the kind with scratches from years of elbows and plates. I traced one groove with a fingertip, stalling. You ever think about moving? I asked. Sometimes, she said, but I don't. This place holds too many versions of me. I'm not sure which one I'd be without it. Her honesty landed heavier than the words themselves. I sipped my tea and tasted more than leaves. Versions can overlap, I offered, though I wasn't sure it made sense. She met my eyes then, and the moment stretched just far enough to make silence the only logical next line. The clock ticked in the background, each second asking a question neither of us answered. Finally, she leaned back, crossing her arms. You've grown up, she said simply. I laughed to dilute it. You've mentioned that. No, she corrected, shaking her head slightly. This time I meant it. You carry yourself differently, like you've stopped waiting for permission. Her words pressed against something in me I hadn't named. I wanted to deflect again, but instead I said, maybe I was waiting for the wrong permission. Her gaze sharpened, softened, then lingered. She looked away first, standing to refill the kettle though both mugs were still half full. A tactic, a pause, a shield. But when she set it back down, she asked, do you miss it? Miss what? Being the kid who ran up and down these stairs. Eating grilled cheese until you complained about stomach aches. Laughing at nothing. The memory unfurled like film. I smiled despite myself. I miss not knowing what to miss. That's honest, she said, almost under her breath. The kettle clicked off. She didn't move to pour. Instead, she returned to her chair, folding her legs beneath her. The robe had been casual comfort. Tonight's posture felt more intentional, an openness with boundaries undefined. I don't usually talk this much, she admitted, eyes on the table. But lately it's been easier. Because I'm here? I asked, half joking, half hoping. She looked up. Maybe. The quiet returned, but it was warmer this time, threaded with something unnamed. I shifted, leaning an elbow to the table, and for a moment we mirrored each other without trying. Two reflections, slightly out of sync. Do you regret it? I asked before I could stop myself. Her brows furrowed. Regret what? Staying, not moving, choosing this quiet. She exhaled slowly, considering. I regret less than I expected, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't slowed down so much. If I'd allowed myself to want more. Her voice thinned on the last words, like they'd been waiting too long to be said. My throat tightened with the weight of hearing them. I wanted to respond, but nothing clean or careful came to mind. So I just held her gaze, and maybe that was enough. The record player was silent, the kettle untouched, the house holding its breath. And in that pause, the distance between us felt smaller than the width of the table. When I finally stood to leave, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because staying longer would have made the line invisible. She walked me to the door, her steps measured, her smile unsteady but real. Next time, she said quietly, don't come empty-handed. Bring a story. I nodded, though I already knew the story was writing itself the moment she opened the door. I told myself it was just an errand again. That lie had grown thin, but lies don't have to be strong to get you to a doorstep. They just need to carry you there. This time I brought nothing at all, not even an apology. I knocked the familiar rhythm, and when the door opened, she already had a look like she'd been expecting it. 3 times, she said softly, a smile flickering. You're going to make a habit. Maybe it already is, I admitted. She stepped aside, and I entered a house dimmer than before. Lamps instead of overhead lights. a soft glow that erased corners. The robe was nowhere, but the comfort remained. This evening it was a loose sweater slipping from one shoulder, jeans cuffed at the ankle, bare feet. Casual but not careless. I was fixing dinner, she said. Chicken and rice. Enough for two if you're hungry. I could eat, I said, though hunger wasn't the reason I came. We moved around the kitchen together, her reaching for spices, me grabbing plates. The rhythm was practiced though never rehearsed. At one point she opened a cupboard too high and muttered, "Step stools in the laundry." I went instead, standing close enough to reach the jar she wanted. My arm brushed her shoulder as I passed it down. "Thanks," she murmured, not moving away right away. Dinner was simple, but the air wasn't. We sat across the table again, but this time the gap felt narrower. She told stories about work, customers who asked for impossible discounts, colleagues who whispered more than they worked. I told her about classes, about a professor who lectured like he was narrating a documentary. We laughed, but the laughter carried something under it. When dishes were cleared, she asked, "Do you mind looking at the hallway light? It flickers like it's nervous." I followed her down the narrow hall. The bulb buzzed weakly overhead. She fetched the step stool, setting it firm. "Careful," she said, placing her hands on the sides as I climbed. Her touch steadied more than the stool. I twisted the bulb, checked the socket, muttered something about loose wiring. "You sound like you know what you're doing," she said from below. "Fake it with confidence," I replied. When I stepped down, we were close. Too close. Our faces leveled for a breath, and neither of us moved. Her eyes searched mine, not hurried, not shy, just searching. "Better?" I asked finally, nodding toward the bulb. "Much," she said, though she hadn't looked up. The moment stretched, then snapped gently as she stepped back, brushing her sleeve as if smoothing away static. We returned to the living room where a record now played. Bill Evans again, the notes drifting like conversation we weren't having. She poured wine this time, half glasses. We sat not across but beside each other on the couch, cushions sagging us closer. I noticed how her sweater slid further down one shoulder, how she didn't adjust it. "You make this house feel different," she said suddenly. "How?" "Like it's lived in again." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "I didn't realize how quiet it had become until you started showing up." I swallowed, throat dry despite the wine. "I like being here." Her eyes lifted, steady. "I can tell." The record hissed between tracks. A dog barked somewhere outside. Time thinned to just those sounds and our breathing. She set her glass down, folded one leg beneath her, and turned toward me fully. "Tell me," she said softly, "why did you really come tonight?" I opened my mouth, but honesty beat me to it. "Because leaving last time felt wrong." Her expression shifted, part relief, part fear. She leaned back slightly, not away, but enough to measure the space between us. Then, carefully, she reached out, brushing her fingers against my hand. A light touch, hesitant like testing water. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "Neither should I," I said. But neither of us pulled back. The moment lingered, raw and fragile. She drew her hand away finally, pressing it to her lap as though it burned. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. "You don't have to know," I replied. Her laugh was quick, almost broken. "That's the problem. I want to." The record kept playing, filling the silence we couldn't. The night had tilted, and both of us knew there was no straightening it back again. The house felt different that night, like it had been rearranged while we weren't looking. Shadows stretched longer, the corners seemed softer, and the air carried a weight that wasn't just silence. We stayed on the couch long after the wine was gone, letting the record spin into its final grooves until only static hummed through the speakers. Neither of us moved to change it. "You should probably go," she said at last, her voice low, almost uncertain. "I know," I answered, though I didn't shift an inch. She looked at me then, a glance that lasted too long to be casual. "But you're not going." I shook my head slowly. "No." Her hand tightened around her knee, knuckles pale. She exhaled through her nose, a sound halfway to a laugh. "You make this complicated." "Or simple," I said. The smile that touched her lips wasn't one I'd seen before. It carried both surrender and warning. She leaned back into the cushion, staring at the ceiling for a moment, then turned toward me again. "I haven't felt like myself in years," she admitted. "Not the woman I used to be." "Then you keep showing up, and suddenly I feel seen." Her confession landed heavy and delicate at once. I wanted to answer, to promise something I didn't fully understand, but words faltered. Instead, I shifted closer. Not touching, not yet, but close enough to hear the tremor of her breath. "You shouldn't be saying this," I whispered. She tilted her head, eyes steady. "Neither should you." The honesty of it pulled us both forward. I raised my hand slowly, brushing a strand of hair that had slipped free near her temple. She closed her eyes for the briefest second, leaning into the touch before opening them again. That tiny motion erased the last of the distance. Her lips met mine gently, carefully, as if testing the possibility of regret. But when she didn't pull away, the hesitation broke. The kiss deepened, not rushed, but inevitable. The kind of kiss that confirms what silence had been saying all along. When we parted, her forehead rested against mine. She whispered, "This changes everything." "I know." We stayed like that, eyes closed, listening to the quiet hum of the room as though it were witness. She drew back eventually, her hand sliding down to mine, fingers threading loosely. The robe she had worn that first night returned to my memory like an omen. Comfort turned invitation, coincidence turned choice. "I can't promise what tomorrow looks like," she said softly. "I don't even know what I want it to be." "Then let's just promise tonight," I replied. She studied me, her thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles. A storm of thought moved behind her eyes, but what surfaced was gentler. "Stay," she whispered, almost like she was afraid of the word. "Only if you want to." I held her gaze, feeling the gravity of it. My chest ached with the truth I couldn't frame in sentences. So I answered the only way that mattered. "Yes," I said. Her hand tightened on mine, and the smallest, most fragile smile curved her lips. The lamp cast us in its circle of light, everything else fading into shadow. The night stretched ahead, uncertain, unpromised, but undeniably ours. And for the first time since stepping onto her porch with nothing but an empty dish to return, I knew I wouldn't be leaving the same way again.
Bye bye.